Across the globe, justice systems are being reimagined through trauma-informed care, desistance theory, and neuroscience. At the forefront of this movement stands a voice for change, a trainer of professionals, and a storyteller committed to evidence-based reform. This is The Criminologist, the podcast exploring the people, the practices, and the possibilities shaping a more humane justice system. And now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidson.
Hello and welcome to episode 229 of The Criminologist podcast, where we explore the intersection of evidence-based practices, lived experience, and the ever-evolving world of criminal justice. Let's face it, we are all trying to make sense of a world that's moving faster than ever. Technology is changing everything. How we work, how we connect, and yes, how we commit crimes. Even how we supervise our clients and how we protect public safety. Probation and parole have traditionally been face-to-face, human-centered fields. But now we're managing clients whose offenses were committed behind screens, not street corners. We're supervising individuals who may never have stepped foot in a courthouse, but whose digital footprints tell another story entirely. How do we adopt? What does supervision look like in a world of cyber stalking, digital fraud, and remote surveillance? And how do we stay rooted in human connection while embracing the tools of the digital age? My guest this episode is Professor Jaishankar, a global voice in criminology who's been asking and answering those very questions. Based in India, but known around the world, he's led the way in understanding how cybercrime, victimization, and even public health intersect with justice. We're going to talk about how to supervise clients involved in online crimes, what the rise of digital victimization means for officers and agencies, and why rehabilitation and accountability need to evolve in the tech area. So whether you're managing high-risk caseloads, updating policies, or just trying to stay ahead of the curve, this episode is for you. So please enjoy my conversation with Professor Jaishankar, and I'll see you all on the other side. Well, welcome to the show, Professor Jaishankar. So glad to have you joining us all the way from India. I am thrilled to have our first guest joining us from that part of the world. We love inserting international perspectives on the show because I truly learn in the work I've done traveling internationally that there's so much we can learn from each other when we get out of our respective silos, agencies, thought bubbles. So I just love getting international perspectives, and you are bringing an incredible perspective today. Before we dive into the topic around cyber digital age we live in and how it impacts us as professionals, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself to the audience, perhaps tell them a little bit about both your educational background and your professional trajectory, and then we can start with this amazing dialogue, Professor.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for inviting me for this podcast. In fact, I'm very happy to be a part of this podcast. And, I was watching listening for a long time, so I thought one day should be with you in this podcast. And to be brief about my background, I hold a master's and PhD in criminology from the University of Madras in Tamil Nadu, South India. Then after completing my master's and PhD, then I became an assistant professor in Manonmaniam Sundarnar University, which is in the southern part of Tamil Nadu, a little bit longer distance, for around 600 kilometers. And then I served there for around 14 years. as an assistant professor of criminology, and did a lot of things, including starting my own society called South Asian Society of Criminology and Victimology, and creating a Center for Cyber Victim Counseling and an online NGO, and also creating new disciplines called as Cyber Criminology in 2007, and also in theory called space transition theory of cyber crimes in 2008. So majority of my contributions in the earlier times came during my Manoormaniam Sundarnath University days as an assistant professor of criminology. But in 2016, I got an opportunity to move to a police university called Raksha Shakti University in Gujarat. Then I moved there as a full professor. I never became an associate professor and directly became a full professor. Then I served there for 4 years, and during the COVID period, I came out and I thought like I should become an entrepreneur or edupreneur to create my own identity. So I started my institute called International Institute of Justice and Police Sciences in Bangalore in 2022. And we are now 2 years old organization, and our institute works like a think tank, and it connects the policymakers, practitioners, and the students and the faculties. So we make kind of a three-pronged approach, bringing into not only the academic part, but also the practitioner part and the policy-making part. So we don't offer degrees or PhDs. We offer only certificate and diploma programs, which is customized to the police, to the prison officials, and also to the students. And also we conduct conferences online and offline. And recently we conducted one conference in Sri Lanka in the University of Jaishankar, and it became a very great success. And now we are also going to conduct another conference in non-traditionally security in Vietnam, which we are planning somewhere in June. So this is a brief about me.
I love it. And I love your passion around connecting people. And that's really what we're all about, like I said, here on the show. I want to dive into one of your many specialties around cybercrime, which I find fascinating. I've been in the field a long time, almost 40 years. And so to date myself, I can tell you and the listeners, Professor, my first job in the field of corrections, probation, parole was before the advent of personal computers. Everything was handwritten. So I've seen a lot of change, and I've seen the field have to adapt to those changes up to and including now cybercrime, living in a digital age, how we make those adjustments. To that end, I really want to talk to you about your space transition theory and how that might help probation or corrections professionals understand and manage cyber-related offenses, which we're seeing more and more and more of in this digital age. So talk about your space transition theory for a bit, if you would.
In fact, I was earlier specializing something on called geographic information systems, and my PhD was in crime mapping. So I already have a touch with the technology. But later I found that there is a growth of cyber crimes in the 2000s, and it is different from the previous times, because previous times the crimes that happened online is connected only with the machines. So people were attacking machines through machines only. But after the arrival of the social media, especially the Facebook and other related kind of a social media, then we find that people started attacking each other through the machines itself. So the previous times where you'll find machine-to-machine attack, but later I found people used machine to attack humans. So this is what made me to think that it is no more computers, it's no more machines, it's the human beings. So that's how I brought in a theory in 2007 when I was thinking that there are a lot of theories in criminology you are aware of, which are basically for physical space, but there is nothing for the cyberspace, because cyberspace is something which is very unique now. It is a very different space which doesn't have a latitude, longitude, a coordinate, there is no geography. Now, this cannot be fit with theories like routine activities theory or other theories which are made for geographical location, where in internet there is no geography. So I thought that I need to find out a theory, and I found this theory called space transition theory, where I propose a simple concept of people behaving online is different from the physical space. Very one-liner, that when people move from one space to another, naturally they change their behavior. So it is very, very normal in every spaces. You can take it like that. For example, like a student go to a college, he cannot behave in the same fashion he is behaving in the house or the home. And he will behave differently. Same, a teacher will not behave in the same fashion when he comes home and cuddles the child. He cannot be a professor there. He will be a father there. Similarly, you can find a change in this cyberspace, which is a little bit different, where there is a anonymity, and this anonymity makes people to think that they can do anything because they can change themselves as a man, as a woman, or anything. And that is the crux of the theory, where I propose the first postulate, where persons with a repressed criminal behavior have a propensity to commit crime online, which otherwise they will not commit offline due to their status and position. In this status, I don't want to mean only the position in which they are holding, but even a status as a child, as a woman, as a man. These are also status which we can say. So in this case, this theory is now more than 15 years old, and we have seen that how it is contributing into the artificial intelligence era, because we have moved from the social media era from the 2004. Now we have gone to the artificial intelligence era in 2024. So you see, in this past 20 years, things have changed a lot. So the theory is the same, but still the applicability is the same. So it is working. It's working in some cases. There are a lot of people testing my theory, and they're finding out that how it works, and they're finding people, they go online, they change, they do things. And you can see that how it works with people who are working as a practitioner, that where you can see that the vigilance have increased a lot compared to the previous times, whether it is the probation officer or whether it is the police officer. The online watching is different from the previous time, where the policing has changed now. Because now the crimes are also more overlapping. Most of the crimes are now happening online because that is more easy compared to the physical space crime, where the police security is higher. So that way around, I am seeing that at one point of time, there will be no difference between a physical and a cyber crime, because it will be turning fully into cyber, because most of the systems, the banks and everything now has gone online. So people would be tending to use online systems more to attack them and to grab money more. That's what you can see in artificial intelligence era, where people are using some kind of a fraudulent image or fraudulent video, and they extract money from others. So that's how this is working. But if you want a perspective for the practitioner, I would say that the theory would help to identify how people are behaving. Because see, after all, crime is a behavior. It's one of the behavior of the entire gamut of the human behavior. But the watch and ward is different from what we are doing in the physical way. There are a lot of watch and ward systems in the offline spaces, like CCTV, security system, RFID tags and everything. Even in probation, RFID tags are used, where the mobility of the person. But we cannot watch them online, what their activities are. But the theory would be on the background, where I suppose that people can be watched online using the components of the theory, that they will not go anonymous. So that is what, there are many softwares now which are spying softwares which are working. The online space is one of the space where we leave a digital print in every time, which is not happening in the physical space. For example, you can even wipe off the physical space digital footprints. The digital footprints we cannot wipe off. Whatever activity we are doing always is stored somewhere in the cloud. And that is what is going to help the practitioners along coupling with my theory.
I was smiling as you were defining space transition theory, Professor, because now I have a name to place on that phenomenon. As you said, it touches various aspects of our lives. And even as a trainer and as an adjunct faculty member, I've noticed the difference between students in the brick and mortar traditional setting versus student behavior in an online or virtual setting, if it's learning or training. Yeah, they behave markedly different. So now I can chalk it up to your space transition theory.
I'll add upon that why students behave like that. Because in the physical space, what happens is that there is a tendency to observe the hierarchy, the director, the principal, the professor. But when you are going online, the hierarchy breaks up. And also you see the person will have some complex in the real world, like they are vertically challenged or horizontally challenged. They may look different. They may not be easily going with others. But in the online, they get the confidence that they can speak with any person. Even they can speak with the President Donald Trump easily online compared to the physical space.
Yeah, it explains it all. Let's drill down maybe from a practitioner standpoint. And let's say, for example, I've got a probation officer who is supervising an individual, maybe for the offense of cyber stalking, and or maybe they're having, in the course of their duties, to interact with a victim of cyber stalking. Are there any maybe practical steps you could give the practitioner in that sense of how to deal with this new landscape of cybercrime?
One point is that now there are three components of cybercrime, which if it is the learning, one is the cyber criminology, which I found, which works on the understanding of the criminal behavior. So that's more theoretical, and also you can connect with practicality. Other is cybersecurity and cyber forensics. So now the integration of these three journals or the three ideas or the subjects should be there for the probation officers and others, because you see they are working on a person who is already been convicted by the court, and then they are watching because maybe the first time offender, because many of the cases of cyber crimes you find they are not some traditional criminals or somebody you need to put the same kind of effort like the real space one, because a student who is just around 18 years old may commit a cyber stalking offense or a hacking offense. So now the approaches should be a little bit different from the other offenders when they monitor these kind of online offenders. But I would suggest the practical suggestion would be that these officers would not have a kind of a technological background or a technical knowledge background, also the legal background. This is cyber law is entirely different from the other laws. And also it varies from one country to another. That is a very problematic one. For example, if you have a grave offense like murder, universally you would see that death penalty will be the norm, except for a few countries not giving death penalty. But universally it is death penalty. But in online, it is not like that. In some countries, certain crimes, certain things may not be even a crime. For example, cyberbullying, I would say that there are not very rigid laws. In America, you can see the First Amendment of the Constitution gives a very broad expression of speech. And I found that many times even I was bullied. When I report to Facebook, Facebook is saying it is not at all an offense in our perspective. That is, it is nothing violating the community standards. Now the question here is the probation officer is local and the offender is local. So whether the court is allowing this offender to again go to the internet, that is one thing. If they are allowing this person to go online, then automatically we need to install some kind of a spyware or software in their mobile phones or the laptops which they are using, where automatically the probation officer will get the history of what he's doing. So that is one thing. So for that, the probation officer should connect with some private or the government cyber security experts. So that is what my practical approach would be.
We're all about reintegration and rehabilitation here on the Criminologist podcast. What role, Professor Jai, does cyber criminology play in the client rehabilitation? And are there any specific intervention strategies that can help clients, particularly those involved in cyber crimes, when they're trying to reintegrate into society and while we're trying to reduce recidivism?
One of the things which you can see in criminology itself, if you go for a broader definition of what Sutherland speaks about, is to criminology is the body of knowledge which sees crime as a social phenomenon, including making of laws, breaking of laws, and the reaction towards the breaking of laws. So the last part is something that which connects with what you are talking about, where the practitioner comes into picture of rehabilitation. And also the 3 R's that I connect is reformation, rehabilitation, and resocialization, where you can see that these offenders are not the typical offenders, as I told, compared to the persons who are in the physical space. For example, take the case of Kevin Mitnick, a very serious hacker in the US, and he was offered professorship later in the many of the universities, and also the US government utilized his services as a cybersecurity expert. So that's why now the question here is that some people are nerds which are doing this activity, but I don't say that not always the nerds come into the picture, because ordinary people also now come online. Even he can be a doctor or a police officer or a professor, but come in disguise and do some crime online because it is giving the freedom. So it's kind of unleashing their monstrous behavior. So that's what I would say. Well, how Freud says that there is a repression, but I'm not bringing Freud here, but still we can open up Freud where that repressed behavior, there is an instinct, animal instinct, which is easily let loose. Now, as pointed with the example of the student, we can put in the same example for the offender to rehabilitate them. So not to unleash the animalistic behavior online. So we need to give some kind of a counseling that you don't go easy online, because online provides that kind of a situation where you can get relaxed compared to the physical space, which is governed by the laws, rules, regulations. And online is a wild west where that even though the laws are there, but it is all invisible. The same way the offender goes invisible, and the probation officer or the parole officer or others who are working on the rehabilitation part should always think from a little bit broader perspective, not equate these offenders with the physical space offenders.
It's refreshing as you speak, Professor, to hear how you're bringing a fresh perspective to these different concepts which have been around for a while, rather. Talk a little bit about those concepts like therapeutic and theological criminology, and maybe specifically, how could a probation or a parole officer incorporate some of those frameworks into the casework that they do to foster personal growth and enhance behavior change among their clients?
These are something that which I find as a new concept, which very recently I found in 2024, only the concept of the therapeutic criminology, which is different from the clinical criminology, because the clinical criminology is a lab-oriented kind of a criminology where people are brought up to a kind of a lab set up, and then they are typically counseled or provided some therapies. But I am going a little bit beyond that to make it very common man's work, like simple things like hearing music as a music therapy, traveling therapy, then yoga therapy, so walking, even small things to detox themselves. Because you see, that is the problem that I found not only with the criminals, but also with the criminologists. I found most of the criminologists are toxic themselves because they are consuming more criminal news or crime news, and I found most of them have become toxic. I found few people, probably you are also a person involving in sports or gym, or I'm seeing from your physique that you look like that. So these people will not be toxic because you're detoxing in a daily basis. But you see a very serious professor or a serious practitioner who is deeply involved in crime prevention or crime detection activity would be affected by the toxic thing. Same therapeutic criminology is helping them to come out of this kind of a toxicity. So that's how the probation officer or others can utilize the idea of therapeutic criminology to give some counseling to the first-time offender or even the other offender, where they can see that these people will come out of that particular criminal mindset. So that is what it is, kind of a detoxing criminology, I would say, therapeutic criminology. The other part, theological criminology, is also typically to work on the rehabilitation part, where I find that religion plays a big role in any person's life, but every religion has its own advantages and disadvantages also. But predominantly all the religion speaks about peace only. So you would see that whether it is Christianity, Hinduism, or Zoroastrianism or Muslim, anything you will find that. So I saw that there are good things in the religion, there are also bad things, because you see over the period of 2000 years, many religions have evolved, like even Christianity or or Hinduism is even older, or Islam 7,500. So, but the thing is that on the timeline we have moved, but there are some aspects which I find that still it is relevant to the modern era also. So religion, some things may not fit. For example, if Jesus Christ says that those who have committed the sin throw the first stone. So that is what, cast the first stone. So that's what he's saying. So in this world, everybody has committed some sin, but there are few people who have gone a little bit ahead and committed a crime, which is more than sin, violated a criminal law. So that's where we can utilize the principles of theology to solve certain kind of problems with offenders and make them oriented towards theology and make them to come out of that criminality. Because you see, most of the criminals or offenders, they have some past problems which is sleeping in them, the childhood problems, all these things. This can be a little bit thwarted and brought back, and they can be brought to a good situation by using theological criminological practice.
As you were speaking, you mentioned the role that religion can play, and I think that's linked to identity. I know this comes up a lot in desistance theory, where they consider rather religion as a mechanism, not the be all end all, but just for some individuals, that is the catalyst of that identity change, or as you were, referencing that sort of detoxification. So I see a lot of parallels with that. And when you were speaking too about the process of, I think you said it was sort of like a detox, it reminded me of something that we embrace in our TIDES supervision model, which is this notion of co-regulation. Not only is it important to regulate the client, but the practitioner has to be regulated as well. And as you said, it's almost a parallel process with the practitioner's headspace has to be in the same area as the client's headspace. Yeah. We deal with a lot of victims, of course, in our work. Many justice-involved individuals feel that they've been victimized by the system. I'm a big proponent of labeling theory and the role that stigmatizing our clients can have on them. How could a probation officer or a correctional professional use insights from political victimology to build trust and rapport with clients, while, of course, still enforcing accountability? We know at the end of the day, it's all about the relationship, that working alliance. But that's a tough balancing act sometimes. So how could the practitioner, again, embrace political victimology to build that trust, which is so required?
Whatever the theoretical concepts or the kind of a new sub-disciplines of criminology I have created, all are interconnected. For example, cyber criminology or cyber victimology, then connecting with therapeutic criminology or theological criminology and political victimology. In fact, these three criminologists, the theoretical, the therapeutic criminology, and also the theological and political victimology, are more oriented towards the rehabilitation part, I would say. Because you see, when it comes to political victimology, politics is an integral part of our life. So many times we are victimized, not just because of the politics which is happening in the higher level, but even in the lower level. You can see within a family there is a politics, within a system there is a politics. So when it comes to ideological politics, and say there's a left leaning, there's a right leaning, then there's a liberal part. So people are connected with all these things, and so that's how, mostly when it comes to the system, that you would find that it is a little bit right oriented, but whereas the offenders and other people are more left oriented. So that's where the political victimology comes into picture, where I would suggest that these probation officers or the correctional officers would tend to move a liberal compared to the right perspective, which would be a little bit rigid to look after them as a serious offenders, as you pointed, with the labeling theory or the stigma, and also the victims connected with the secondary trauma of the secondary victimization because their husband would be in the jail or their parents would be in the jail, and that will also affect the people, because many times there are people, the spouses are affected because of the convicts. So even much studies are now happening. One of my MPhil students, she did a study on spouses of the convicts in India, and she found out the large number of spouses are being labeled and also had stigmatized in the society. And it is a very typical problem that there are services for probation officers for the offenders, but there are no much services for the spouses of the convicts. So that is another area where I would say they are also part of the political victimology. They have become victims because they never wanted to become, but they are indirect victims because husband has been incarcerated, and these women, they lost their jobs, they lost their money, they lost their family, but still they somehow survive in spite the breadwinner is inside the prison. That is one thing. So when it comes to the other concept of political victimology, you can see that things are moving faster in our society, that wherever you can see the democratic principles are broken in some area, and so people who are against the democratic principle or people who are following the democratic sometimes being victimized by the system, and system as such does not have a kind of a political component. I would say system is neutral, but system is like a kind of a water. It flows in the kind of a cup with the shape. It takes the shape of the cup. So, for example, if a politician comes to the right-wing ideas, naturally the system also becomes right-wing because the politician or the administrator will be more using that kind of idea. But when it comes to another politician with a left-oriented leaning, then the system also turns according to that kind of a system. So somewhere you would see that it's kind of a time frame that works, rather than I would say that it's a kind of a static one. I would say it's a very dynamic one, the political processes and the people victimized. So today somebody is politically victimized. Tomorrow the person can become a kind of a parliament member, or even they can become the president. So many times you would find that sometimes so victims also get a reprieve in another regime, or sometimes the offender will get a reprieve in the another regime also. That's what you can see how things are changing around the world. Even I would cite the example of the United States, how now things are moving a little bit different compared to the previous regime. But since it's a very political topic, I don't want to go much into that. So let us stick on to the political victimology, where it can anything that where people would be victimized because of their ideology. And ideology is again is based on people's perspectives and people's understanding and people where they hail from. So that's what you can see. A communist sometimes later they get good money, they become capitalist also. So the ideology changes. So if the capitalist loses the money one day, they become a communist. So it's not like a kind of a static one. We have not seen the kind of political processes which is happening around the world, how things are changing. But now you can see always there is a compromise between certain values at one point of time and the constitutional values which are emerging, which are being violated by certain people. So these are some of the things, the political victimology, which I'm introduced to studying it. It takes some time. So I told you these three concepts are very new: the therapeutic criminology, theological criminology, and political victimology. So I see that we need to wait for another 10 more years to see that how it impacts the society, how it impacts the academia, and how it impacts the kind of practitioners' perspectives. Because the previous one, the cyber criminology and cyber victimology, is now being taught in American universities like Purdue, Alabama, and New York universities. So slowly that developments are happening. But now see, I have a little bit a big role to play in introducing these disciplines to academia, then to the practitioner. So where I am trying to write some books and publish some articles. In fact, I am writing one book called Toxic Criminology. It's a handbook for criminologists and criminal justice officials. a kind of handbook which will make them to work in a professional manner and get detoxified. So that's where in that book also I introduced the concept of therapeutic and theological criminology to come out of their own secondary traumatization, because you see, as I told you, the consumption of crime is typical to the consumption of alcohol. So excess of anything is dangerous, where alcohol in a moderate sense it will be good, but if it is excess, it is affecting the dopamine and also it is affecting the liver. The same goes to the crime news also. So at one point of time I have found the empathetic part of the humans within the criminal justice officials and the criminologists have gone, and they have become more unsympathetic and empathetic. They have become more like a stone where the system is giving them humans, because you see, that's how we are different from robots, where they don't have emotions. But the consumption of crime news more will also make us more a robo. And to release from that kind of a robotic behavior only, I have introduced the ideas of therapeutic criminology and theological criminology. And not only it will be useful for the offenders, but also the managers who are managing those offenders.
I love that observation you made about the practitioner almost being overdosed by crime, even though that's their chosen profession. And I think that's something that the field really needs to continue to take a look at. I know, for example, again, in the practice model I co-developed with my colleague Nicole, the tied supervision model, a component of that is resiliency, and we train on the value of growing the client's resiliency, but we're also all about, as you're alluding to, sort of this parallel process and saying, there's so much value added for your agency to instill resiliency into your staff members to avoid burnout, turnover, the kind of things you just alluded to that come with the daily grind of being exposed to crimes and victims and these horrific sides of humanity. So I think we need to really practice what we preach as far as what we're trying to instill in our clients, whether it's resiliency, identity shifts, self-regulation, social support. Those are great from an agency standpoint to have a healthier, stronger agency. So I love where you're coming at that parallel process and that almost self-care that we need to practice more for a healthy, thriving agency. Let me change gears a little bit, and I love that you've got all these concepts. I'm a big believer that we really need to take a more broad approach to the clients that we interact with, whether it's in corrections or any other really human services. I think we've gotten really good at our respective lanes and teasing those out, whether it's, for example, the risk need responsivity framework. But now we're realizing there are so many other things that we haven't considered over the years, things we've been mentioning here. And again, I just love broadening that lens for the practitioner. Talk about another unique concept of yours around microbial criminology and how that might relate to corrections as far as, implications for the probation parole officer, those public health considerations, the role that we have in administering our jails and prisons, or even when the professional is doing a home visit for one of their clients.
This is again a new concept, which out of an experience that I have brought an idea called microbial criminology, because I found that the microbes in our stomach has a connection with our behavior, because that's how you can see that it has a connection with the gut axis. So I have found many studies, and also even personally I've seen where the H. pylori bacteria alters the gut system and axis, where the person's decision-making power has gone. So that's why they loosened up and they have done certain activity. And this is what I try to relate with the offenders also. The microbial criminology is a new introduction, and it will take some time because we need little bit samples, because getting a human samples is not that easy, because you have to get a sample in the prison and check the offender whether really they are affected by this bacteria. Because the question here is that, can a bacteria cause a crime? So that is the question I'm posing, and it's it's the chances are there where if we find the number of microbial attack in the body of a offender, and then suppose a doctor cleans that particular thing which kind of active medicines, then we could see the difference between the previous and the past, so and also the present. So we can come to know that whether the bacteria is the real reason for the person committing crimes. Because see, crime is not something that which is innate. It is only a kind of a behavioral issue where we violate a law. But do we wantedly violate the law? That is the question here comes, because the many of the old theories says about biology, and again later it comes with the hormones and others. So connecting those things, I am bringing a new idea called microbial criminology. But as I pointed earlier, it need to be tested. So this is still in the kind of a nascent stage, I would say, not being tested. This is a kind of hypothesis I am posing, that maybe there is a reason that the gut axis has gone bad because of the H. pylori bacteria of any individual. That's why they have committed a crime. So this is a kind of a assumption. But I spoke with many doctors regarding this, but the doctors told that we never thought in this angle. We always thought that how to cure the H. pylori bacteria for the stomach ulcers only, or even the gas systems, but not in the sense of a behavioral aspect. So that is where I spoke with some people, and we need to form a team connecting with people who are doctors, who are behavioral specialists, criminologists, and correctional officers, and probation officers, and then try to get a sample out of these people. But before that, the ethics should be governed, and we should get the ethics permission from suitable bodies, and then conduct this research. And I hope this will be a little bit of breakthrough.
I want to introduce you, when we get offline, to a colleague of mine. He's been on the show many times. You may have heard him, Dr. Jared Brown from Concordia University. In fact, I just interviewed him yesterday for an upcoming episode as well. And he talked about kind of what you're talking about, the relationship between the gut and the brain, and how it's just an underutilized and a misunderstood phenomenon. I told him at one point when he was sharing a lot of his insights with me, I said, as somebody who in my career, I've trained countless practitioners on risk assessment and case planning, I can look back and think to myself, I've never trained a probation officer or trained a trainer to ask about their client's diet, or wonder if their client is eating their meals out of vending machines and fast food, why their cognitive behavioral interventions don't have the efficacy that they should. Or I've never, as a risk assessment trainer, even introduced the concept of sleep, right? Are you asking the individual under your care and supervision how much sleep they're getting? I mean, there's so many things that we're not taking into consideration. And it's, as I said earlier, Professor Jai, I think we just need to keep increasing the aperture of that lens and taking a much more holistic approach to the individuals that we work with, rather than just our tiny respective sliver of expertise, and understand that it's a sort of a all of the above approach. And I think that's an area you mentioned. We need to form a team. Like I said, I'll introduce you to Dr. Brown. I think he's actually going back to school to get yet another PhD in nutrition, because he feels so passionate about this.
That's the connection. The health and the nutrition has a connection. And as you pointed, sleep is very important, because you see, every organ of ours get rejuvenated at one point of time. For example, 10 to night 12 o'clock, the liver, and then again the heart, and like that. So, but if there is a lack of sleep, then the rejuvenation does not happen. And that's how I find that the decision-making skills of the officers or people working in the criminal justice area reduces over a period of time, because they didn't allocate time for their health perspective. Because that is what, if there is a wall, then only we can have a painting. That's a saying in Tamil in India, we say. So if there is no wall, we cannot paint. So first of all, the officer himself or herself should take care of themselves. Then only they can go for the victim or the client. So you see, I personally believe if the lawyers are called to be social engineers, I would call the officers or the criminologists as social doctors. So if the doctor himself or herself becomes patient, how can they cure the anomaly of others? So that's what I believe. The first they have to take care of themselves, because this profession also will create more anxiety, which many do not understand. Because I have seen people, the anxiety, they think it's more a psychological issue, but I'm seeing it's more a kind of physical issue where the gut system is altered. That's why I also developed the idea to check the bodies of people who are working in the field of criminology and the criminal justice, which is different from what Lombroso brought. Lombroso thought how the bodies of the offenders. But I'm looking into how the bodies of the criminologist and criminal justice officials are there. I find a little bit very typical observation I would share, where the stomachs are a little bit conical in nature. The people who are pursuing criminology or the policing part, because their stomachs are not the typical fatty stomach like the others. I have noticed where it came because of the anxiety. Because you see, in terms of a lion or a tiger coming, then we get fear. But a perceived lion or a tiger in our place, then we get anxiety. That's what's happening for a kind of a criminal justice practitioner, where they always see the lion and the tiger. That's how first their gut system gets affected. And that's why the connection with relation to all my therapeutic criminology to treat them, or even toxic criminology, or what I call now the microbial criminology, can be put in tandem, connecting with food, connecting with health, sleep, then it will work. Because these are the people going to help the society, but they should not become victims. So my first concern is more about the practitioners rather than the offenders themselves, because their system will help the offenders, but nobody will help the practitioners.
Yeah, exactly. We have so much to learn again about that whole area of self-care, and how a lot of these same approaches we take with the clients, we should also be practicing on ourselves. I mentioned earlier that I love having international guests such as yourself on the show. I've been blessed to have trained around the world and met a lot of international colleagues. I'm part of the American Probation and Parole Association's International Relations Committee, so I really have a passion for this. Professor Jai, from your experience working with international justice organizations, what are some evidence-based practices used in other countries that could maybe improve probation and correctional work here in the United States?
Some of the international agency I was connected with is more with the United Nations, where I was being a consultant to work on victims of terrorism. So we didn't go to the offender side, so more we went to the victim side. But either way, that is also another way it's helpful for the probation or correctional officials, because many times the victims of offenders, victims of the terrorism especially, those are the people who do not have much support compared, because you see many of the crimes have some motive, but in terms of terrorism there is no motive or anything, because it's a larger disaster. I would say, like for example, when 9/11 happened, 5,000 people were killed. Those people were never connected with Osama bin Laden, and nobody knows about him, many people also, but still they become victims. So that's why you see many of the practitioners should connect with victims of terrorism, where they need some support also. So both the criminology and victimological system should be helping these practitioners in terms, I would say, the perspective I put into the United Nations system, because United Nations system works in various areas, but for example, drugs and crime, but they also work in other areas. But when it comes to the perspective of the United States, I would see that a kind of a localized approach, which I have seen in county police or others, many things they are working. Even there are small level of police like university police and others, where they can bring in certain perspectives, which is very contemporary, and also everything should not be law-oriented. That's what I believe, because you see, law is a tool, but the law cannot be the ultimate tool. And the law is only a kind of a basic level. But the society which is more law-oriented, what happens is that everything sees as a legal mechanism. But solutions cannot come only from laws. Laws are only kind of a protective tools, but you need to work more on how to provide solution beyond the criminal justice processes. And that's how the probation officers work, where they can help the clients and others, the victims or the offenders, in a way which they can bring some new concepts. That's what I would think on.
Before I let you go, Professor Jai, I want to circle back to your expertise around cybercrime. I know listeners of the podcast, some of them are younger and they're just starting out in their careers, and they might be looking for something to set them apart from their colleagues when they're looking to advance their careers. And maybe they're thinking, hey, I might want to go down this cybercrime rabbit hole and, again, sort of be an expert in that area. Are there specific training programs or certifications that you could recommend for, like I said, a young practitioner who might want to develop those skills around cybercrime to augment their resume, if you will?
So now many of the American universities are offering online programs where I've seen even my own Cyber Criminology is offered as a kind of a certificate or a minor. There are many universities which are offering. But I want to have a kind of a combined approach between cyber criminology, cyber security, and cyber forensics for a practitioner, because cyber criminology looks more into behavioral aspects. That alone is not sufficient. So I would add more the technological component. So there are crash courses on hacking. There are crash courses on ethical hacking. There are crash courses in cybersecurity, cyber forensics. But one can also customize with the agencies to know what it is a requirement, because you see in terms of correctional officials, they're far different from compared to the leasing or the courts, because they come in the later part. That is the thing that after the offense is committed, and then the offender is handed over to them, or they have to do some monitoring. So in fact, their work is a little bit different because they are more offender oriented, which is system given. So they don't do much on the crime prevention. Typically, the policing is doing, but they are doing crime prevention in a different way, where they want to rehabilitate the offender and relocate the offender or re-socialize the offender. So that's how I was talking about how the cybercrime aspect related to the correctional officials. They can make some kind of customized package. They can speak with universities to understand what is their exact requirement. Why do they need to understand cybercrime? Because in the future, many of the offenders they are going to manage, they are going to be cyber offenders rather than the physical offenders, because that's where now where the money is going to be, because it's more online, and also people are also more online. So that's where you can cheat, you can abuse, you can do anything more online and escape also. So physical crimes will slowly reduce, and more online crimes will happen, and more online offenders will be arrested in the future. Then the role of the probation officers will be more, because these offenses are first-time offenses, or these offenses will not have the same gravity like the physical space.
Just to expand on that a little bit more, I mentioned the American Probation and Parole Association earlier in the interview. I went to their conference recently in Las Vegas. In fact, I was part of an intensive session where we did a 4-hour overview of the role of artificial intelligence in corrections. And on the one hand, I can tell you, Professor Jai, it was extremely popular. In fact, some of the feedback I got later on was it was so popular that for the upcoming conference in New York City, they want to give that space to more people because there was a real thirst for it. But on the flip side of the coin, I know we need to talk about that balance, because there were other individuals who, of course, recognize that the landscape is changing. We need to embrace the technology and understand artificial intelligence. But how do we temper that with the fact that we don't want to, or we can't even replace those human relationships with technology? So how do you see us striking that balance between technology and the requisite human connection that we need in supervision?
There are many mundane things. There are many kind of a routine administrative things, which takes a lot of time of these probation officers or the correctional officers, which the technology can take. For example, there's a vast amount of data that can be easily analyzed, or kind of spreadsheets which can be easily done by the artificial intelligence, so that they can have the kind of personal assistance with the technology. But the human part, the artificial intelligence cannot do. So that's what I think that many mundane activity, which naturally takes a lot of time of the practitioners, could be now stopped with the technology, because you see, technology cannot replace humans, but it is a wonderful tool to assist the humans. And naturally, I told you that if you want to make a mapping of a kind of offender, easily it can be done. And also criminal profiling of an offender, his history and everything, his geography, all these things easily artificial intelligence or the systems can give a easy picture. So it will take a quicker time to analyze entire history of the offender for past 15 years. What are the crimes he is committing, where he has gone, what he has done, and how many kind of offenses he has committed, or how many times he is arrested. So all this data can be easily produced as a meaningful information in the hands of the official, and that way it will be very highly helpful. So I would say that the reliance of artificial intelligence should be minimal in a way that it only takes care of the administrative activities and not the emotional activities.
That's the same reply that I often give to people who are reticent about embracing the technology, because they get these dystopian cognitive distortions about machines replacing us as humans. But I point out to them, as you just did, Professor Jai, that no, think of it as the technology freeing up the practitioner to have more of those human connections. I was talking to a colleague recently, and I was reflecting on my career as a practicing probation officer, supervising clients, and I thought, boy, in a 40-hour work week, I was trying to isolate the time that I actually spent interacting with my clients, doing quality supervision, and it was a fraction of that work week. Well, why is that? Because I was doing all these administrative tasks, all these administrative chores that AI could do that, not to replace me, but to free me up to spend more quality time with my clients and making sure that those interventions take hold. Yeah, and I think that's the reframe that we have to approach with this.
Well, things also, certain things can be done. I would suggest, for example, if you want to make a music therapy, you can use the artificial intelligence to create some new songs for them, which is not possible in the earlier times, that we rely on the existing music, right? But a probation officer can create a customized music to that person in their names, even in their songs can be in their own names. So you see, if somebody is singing a song in our name, it touches more compared to a song which is unknown, for example. So if I write a song on Jai and it resonates me, then it is more easier. So I would say that there are some components of artificial intelligence can be utilized for emotional activities too, apart from the administrative activities.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. It's not just about the administrative activities. As I mentioned, part of the session that I just attended that I was a part of with the American Probation and Parole Association, yeah, the opportunities are limitless as far as the creative aspect of how we can embrace artificial intelligence, almost to be like our partner or our coach, our co-pilot, as much as simply the administrative assistant that frees up our time. Yeah. Let me put you on the spot a little bit, Professor Jai. Look into your crystal ball. If I have you back on the show in, let's say, 3-5 years, what do you think the world might look like? What do you think we might be talking about? What might some hot future topics or trends be in criminology that you foresee on the horizon?
I would see 2-3 things. One, the overlapping of cybercrime and physical space crime will be more higher and higher. That the thin line will be there between cybercrime and the real space crime. 1. 2, the human behavioral aspect. There will be a lot of changes where the sympathetic and empathic quotient will reduce much. Already it is reducing. It will reduce much because people are now more oriented towards machines, and the values of the humans are reducing. The respect for teachers and the system will reduce comparatively because they think the artificial intelligence provides better answers than human beings. Because see, again, the perfection is a problem that will happen in another 5 years, because people are not that perfect, and that is how society operates also, because imperfection leads to perfection, and also any human will get primed over a period of time, but the future generation will not allow flaws, and that will create more problems in the families, more divorces, more breakups, more interpersonal problems will emerge in another 5 years.
Professor Jaishankar, thank you so much for joining us all the way from India today. I'm going to hold you to it and look forward to you coming back on the Criminologist podcast to talk about some of these amazing changes on the horizon. Thank you again, Professor Jai. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Joe. It was nice meeting you, and I hope that we will establish more relationship. That I have seen that you've been recently a Fulbright specialist, and so I'm also interested to apply for a Fulbright fellowship. So hope that one day we can meet in the US. Thank you.
That would be my dream. Yeah, let's manifest that and make that happen. All right. Until next time, Professor, be well, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was Professor Jaishankar joining us all the way from India to share insights that stretch across continents, disciplines, and decades of criminological thought. If you're like me, you are still digesting much of what we just covered, from space transition theory to therapeutic and theological criminology to the provocative ideas around political victimology and microbial criminology. But at the heart of it all was one clear message. The work of justice doesn't stop at the courthouse door, and it doesn't end at the digital threshold either. As probation and parole professionals, we're being asked to supervise in a world that's shifting beneath our feet. Online crime, digital victimization, remote surveillance. It's no longer futuristic. It's here. And it demands that we evolve not only the tools we use, but the mindsets we bring. Professor Jaishankar reminded us that change starts with perspective, that language, policy, and even belief systems shape how we view the people we serve. And that if we really want to build rehabilitative systems, we have to stay curious, open-minded, and yes, willing to challenge old definitions. So as you head back into the field, the office, or the training room, I invite you to reflect on one simple question. What does supervision look like in a digital world? And how can we make sure we're not just keeping up, but leading with humanity? Until next time, thank you for listening and for being part of this global conversation on change. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
The Criminologist podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, training opportunities, program design, or interview requests, visit theparagongroup.llc.com. To learn more about the TIDES supervision model, a trauma-informed, desistance-based approach to community supervision, please visit TIDESLLC.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to check out the Criminologist YouTube channel for additional content, including exclusive video interviews and international insights. Both the Criminologist podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Don't forget to give the show a 5-star review. And as always, thank you for listening.